down in this part of the world. I was born and raised on the Cherokee Indian Reservation, born there in 1946. That's been several years ago. And remember the times that the tourists began to come to the reservation and their Studebakers, and a lot of people don't remember what a Studebaker was. And the old Studebaker cars, and they'd get up on the mountains and they would boil over a lot of time, and the old 50 Fords and the 40 Fords and those Chevys, and it was a beautiful time. You know, I'd never left the reservation. The only thing I knew is what I saw there. I lived on a farm, and we had an old mule named Rhodey. Rhodey had come from the old military surplus back in those days. It wasn't a truck or something like that you get from surplus, but it was a mule. We had the old mule hooked up with a single tree. Meant she could pull one plow, one cultivator. We had corn and we hoed it out. We had a lot of corn to shuck and to shell in the wintertime. We did that in the floor of the barn, and with hay in there also. We had to feed Brody, because the next year we had to use her again to make crops. We had milk cows, and my dad would never sell the milk cows for beef because that was for the little ones. So the milk cow was very important. We farmed those hillsides. And I went away after I had graduated from high school, and I fortunately came to a place called Gardner Webb. I drove a 1957 Chevy down to Gardner Webb, and I parked it behind Decker Dorm, and then when my brothers came down to get it, I didn't want to be there with the car. This shows how things have changed in that time, and I wanted to be there to study. So I couldn't leave on the weekend, and everybody else went away, and there was a few of us who stayed on campus. I was telling Clyde over here, who was one of my professors in biology at that time, and I knew he really cared because he worked with us and made us feel like we were welcome there. One of the reasons I graduated from Western Carolina University later, then went back to get my master's degree, and I wanted to be a teacher too. And the way you were taught will tell you whether you want to go back into that profession again or not. But the way that he handled us, we knew that there were people out there, and the more you cared, the more you taught. And so I came back and taught on the reservation. I taught everything from kindergarten to college level courses. And now I went back to school, started over again in the kindergarten. I was working with kids that these new teachers cannot deal with. So I have a room with a social worker and 2 therapists and 2 skill builders and an assistant teacher. And we take the little kids that nobody else can do anything with, and we teach them. And then we take them like a butterfly. We release them into their gray box, and they fly away. So, you know, there are not any people in the whole world that are not worth serving. So that's one thing that makes a big difference. And that's what I do. I wanted to talk to my counselor in Cherokee, and he said, well, you know Native Americans do not become teachers. I said, I didn't know that. He said, I think you'd be a really good mechanic. I said, I have a 46 Ford, and I've already fixed it up, and I don't want to do that anymore. I've been a mechanic. And he said, well, you could go all the way and be a body and fender man. I said, don't do that either. My brother's doing that. He said, well, I don't suggest that you become a teacher. It'll just be hard for you to find a job. So I went to Gardner Webb. I was accepted there. I excelled there. And given you the opportunity, you will do whatever you want to do and do it well. So I'm glad that I attended Gardner Webb in Western. I'm glad that I taught education. Because in those days, Native American people were just on the reservation. I thought I was one of the richest men in the world as a kid growing up. we had biscuits and gravy and country ham and tenderloin as much as we wanted. When I went away, they told me I'd grown up in poverty. I didn't know what that was. They gave me a little box of cereal and dried up corn in a box and let me put milk on it. I had milk fresh from the cow. I had all those other things off the farm. I felt sorry for those other people that didn't grow up in poverty. I knew every animal in the whole biome. I knew the trees by looking at the leaves. And that's why I love biology so much, because I thought the whole world was a biological place to be, and it was. I want to tell you a little bit about the Cherokee. The Salagi, and it's a beautiful language. Salagi ani yamya means Cherokee, the principal people. My name is Owle. I'm a Cherokee Indian. Katushi. I live in the mountains, and that is where my home is. And so we own parts of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, and West Virginia, and we own this spot right here too. 240,000 square miles of territory. All the way from Lynchburg, Virginia, down to Bowling Springs, North Carolina, down into Columbia, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, down to Tuscumbia, Alabama, part of Mississippi, back to Nashville, Tennessee, all of Kentucky, and back to West Virginia, Beckley, then back over to Lynchburg again. That's a big territory. A lot of land. And there was nobody here at the Cherokee. Can you imagine what it would look like? You go down to the river, you go down to the Broad River. That thing is so crystal clear. Everything in it was just natural. You go to the Oklahoma Lofty up in the hills, and many of you used to go there, and if you don't still go there, that river is still there. It's still crystal clear and beautiful. Not only that, when we have elk running all over the place, you can be driving up the road, and all of a sudden there's a critter about this tall just walks out in front of you. And you don't dare run over it because you probably just bounce off of it. Those are big rascals. You have wild turkey everywhere. The squirrels are back again. The rabbits, the white-tailed deer, the bear. The bears are up there. It's a beautiful place to be. So the Cherokee folks took care of their land. They didn't take anything that they didn't leave a little gift for. For example, if you went out into the woods and you wanted to take a hickory tree to make a stickball stick out of, you would go out and you would cut down that one hickory tree that you needed, and you would take it and leave on the stump a little bead or something that just showed that you appreciated what nature had given you. You didn't go cut down all the trees. You know, those trees take in carbon dioxide and they give off oxygen. And oxygen is what we breathe, and we couldn't live without it. So we leave all those things out there in the woods and take only what we need. And that's the thing the Cherokee believed in for many, many years. Cherokee was divided up into clan systems. There were 7 of them. Those 7 clans were the bird clan, the deer clan, the blue clan, pink clan, the wild potato clan, the wolf clan, and the long hair clan. Why did they have clans? Why did they divide up? Because we need families. If you're on a farm, a dairy farm down here in Cleveland County, you have to have new blood within that herd all the time. The clan was set aside so people could not intermarry with their own clan, and that made them biologically pure. I've seen people back in the mountains that are landlocked in this little valley and can't get out. and they intermarried. We did these 5 families in that valley over and over and over and over again. And like in Kentucky, sometimes you even have through that intermarriage so much. You have them turning blue, skin blue, and all the barrel chest and things like that. But the Cherokees protected that. You could not marry within your own clan. I took care of it. And besides, the clan was also the police for you. If you went out and somebody's after you, you say, hey, I'm from the Wolf clan. If you mess with me, that whole bunch is going to be coming after you. And so they kept you safe as individuals. And so the Cherokees did not marry within their own clans for a good reason. And you know what? We are a matriarchal society. And you girls in here today, you need to know that meant girls rule. That meant girls own the property. That meant the girls give their names to their children. Okay? That's matriarchal. So you remember all the times that the settlers would come in and they wanted to make deals with the Cherokee people. They would invite all the men to come and sign the treaties. Well, that didn't work too well because the women owned it. So every one of those treaties was null and void. Think about that. The Cherokees began to lose their land, treaty after treaty and treaty again. And eventually, it would all be gone. They lost every single acre of land. In 1838, were rounded up and marched to Indian Territory, which is today Oklahoma. 15,000 Cherokee people marched on that Trail of Tears, and 5,000 of them would die. And they were moved simply because of the color of their skin. And all that land, that 240,000 square miles of territory, was gone. And you'll ask, well, why and how are you still here? We have 17,000 people living in the Cherokee today that are on the roads on the eastern band of Cherokee Indians. And after they got to Oklahoma, there is 240,000 out there in Oklahoma today. A little place called Kickball. Kickball means 2 is enough. Qualla is 2, Qualla is enough. And the reason they named it Kickball is because only 2 people showed up to name that town. It said Kickball, 2 is enough, so they named it Kickball. And that's strange. After all of that suffering on the Trail of Tears, after all that death, as a people, we're still here today because we were resilient. We have faced every situation that we possibly could, and as a people, we're still here. You look at the old headdresses. Remember when some of you used to go to Cherokee and you'd have your picture taken with the guy standing in front of the teepee with a huge headdress on? That's something I learned later in college. It was role expectation. That's how people expected us to be. They expected us to wear long Hollywood headdresses. Cherokees wore feathers that hung down on a piece of leather because we lived in woodland areas. If you take off this big headdress through these woods down here in Cleveland County, how far are you going to make it? You're going to get stuck in the sawbriars. After about 50 yards, you're going to be there for a while. Like I was when I was on the school bus. I pushed my little sister in the creek as we were crossing the little bridge to get back home. My mother said, you had it. I decided I outrun my mother. I took off out through the cow pasture. I get into a whole bunch of sawbriars, and I got caught. My mother just wore me out good, right in front of the school bus. And the school bus stopped to see all that activity going on. And so I didn't push my sister in the creek anymore, not ever again. I want to go over and talk to you a little bit about some stories. And for the kids, I want to tell you a story. You know what a possum is? Seen a possum? They're always in your backyard, right? They're always knocking the garbage can over, dragging all that garbage out of the garbage can and spreading it all over the yard. Well, in the old days, Possum was down by the creek. And he was walking down the creek, talking, coming back up the creek, and said, come on, go with me. Come on, we'll walk up here together. The raccoon came down and said, Possum, what's wrong with you? Who are you talking to? I'm talking to my friend in the water. He said, every time I walk this way, he goes with me. When I smile, he smiles back at me. That raccoon said, Possum, you're crazy. He said, that's your reflection. Possum said, really? Is that me? He said, you mean I have a tail that beautiful? And his tail was big and fluffy and bushy and beautiful, and so he was so proud. That possum went out in the woods and he started bragging and said, everybody's going to look at me, look how beautiful I am. So they came down to see the possum and they said, yes, you got a beautiful tail. That's magnificent. And then every morning, at 5 o'clock in the morning, he went and he awakened every poor little animal in the woods. He said, get up, everybody, wake up, come see the possum. So they came out to see the possum. And he awakened the next morning, and the next morning, and they got tired of it. And the fox and the cricket got together and said, we need to do something with that crazy possum. All he does is brag. And you know, bragging's not a good thing, is it? Everybody sort of gets tired of it after a while. So Mr. Possum, would you go home with us tonight? They're having a contest down at the Indian village. And if you go home with us, we will brush your tail and get it just perfect because we're going to give a prize to whoever's got the most beautiful tail. Possum said, what's the prize? They're going to have a whole big basket full of possum grapes. He said, oh, I like possum grapes. He said, I'll go with you. I'll go with you tonight, and you can comb my tail. So he followed them, went home with, went down into the fox's den. They began to brush his tail, and it felt so good. Possum went fast asleep. And that cricket went over and started chewing on his tail. He chewed all the hair off the possum's tail. They wrapped it up with a piece of deer skin so the possum wouldn't see it. They went to the contest the next day and he jumped up on the stage and said, okay, take that off my tail. It's my turn to win all those grapes. So they took that thing off his tail and everybody in the audience began to laugh and said, oh, look at the possum. He looks so silly. And he looked back at his tail. Didn't have one single hair on it. And the possum rolled over on his back and pretended he was dead. And if you go to that possum, he acts like he's going to tear you up, right? Snarls and all that. But if you touch him with a stick, don't hit him. That possum's going to roll over on his back, act like he's dead. You pick him up by the tail and he just is limp. Take him off and throw him in the woods somewhere. He wakes back up and he takes off again. So that's how the possum learned to pretend and play possum. I know you guys sometimes go upstairs and Mom comes in to check on you. You have your head under the cover and you're all covered up. You're so still. And you're pretending like a possum, right? All this time you have your little video games or your notebook in there, watching it quietly, right? Sometimes you do that. That's playing possum too, right? Cherokees had a lot of other stories. They said in the very beginning of time, the Great Spirit had made the heavens and the earth. And the earth was covered over with water, and he wanted to put humans down upon it. But there was no place to put them. So he sent the birds down. They began to fly across the earth, back and forth. And all the birds began to get tired. And they all got tired but one. And his name was Egwashuli, which means a giant buzzard. The old buzzard sitting over there asleep. You know how buzzards do. And the Great Spirit came over and said, Mr. Buzzard, can you help us? We need another bird to fly and see if there's any land for humans to be put down on. So the buzzard said, I can fly as long as you want me to. You ever really watch the buzzard? They're very smart. Most people think, oh, they just eat dirty stuff. But they help clean up the roads. And if it was not for the little bugs and the buzzards and everything, you'd have things laying on the road smelling bad all the time. But they clean it up. The little buzzard went down and began to fly back and forth across the earth. And you know, they just sail. They They just go like this in the air. They don't have to flap those wings. They just sail. And he sailed and he sailed, but he too began to lose altitude. He came down like this, and he'd get ready to crash into the mud when he awakened. And he started flapping those giant wings, and when they went down into the soft mud, guess what they made? Valleys. Remember, he was a giant, and when they came back up again, the mud stuck to him. Big mountains and the valleys. And the only thing that got me through when I was at Gardner-Webb College was the fact that I could get on the high land down there, look back, and I could just barely see the mountains back in Cherokee. So that made me think, well, I'm really home. So I could stay longer. So I finished Gardner-Webb. But the old buzzard made the mountains. And they said, Canna, egua, surely will he stop? That means, come on back, big buzzard. You're going to make the whole world in the mountains. So they had the mountains. And they didn't have anything to keep them warm with. And they were getting cold. They had animal skins wrapped up in. They lived in caves. So they were still cold. And they didn't know what to do. One day there was a bolt of lightning that came down and struck a tree, and that tree began to burn down into a hollow stump. They said, that feels so good. Who will go get some of that fire for us? And the old crow and the raven said, we'll go get it. They went over there and dived into that burning stuff. It burned them jet black. They're still black today. And they said, who else will go? And the little screech owl said, I can go get it. I can fly faster than that. So he flew over there, dived into the burning stuff. It burned scuff marks all around his eyes. And that screech owl has yellow eyes even today. It's all burned around the edges. He said, I'm not going back. They said, we have anybody else who would please try? And they had a little tiny water spider about so big. She came up. She said, I can get it. So she walked across the water, raised an ember into a little piece of pottery she had made, brought it back, dumped it out in the grass, and began to burn. From that day forward, the Cherokees had not sea, not or fire. So then after they got that fire, they would start doing other things. They started eating better. They started inventing tools. And some of you boys and girls would probably like something like this, but we don't like you to have it unless you know how to use it properly. That's a dart made out of yellow locust and Scottish thistle around the end. And what you do is you put that in a piece of river cane and you empty out all the stuff in the middle. It's got little holes covering it right at those joints. Has a piece of wood in there. So you drill that out and you straighten out that river cane. It's not bamboo, it's river cane. It grows along the rivers down here on the Broad River. And I may have, some of the kids may have put the other darts, I had 3 of them, so they're probably all down in there. So if they come out, you want them. There they go. And then you put these in there like this. Here's the big one. And it'll stick into the wall over there if I shot it hard enough. So watch. So we have a lot of darts over there, and this is a good thing. This is what the Cherokees hunted with. They went out and brought food in from the forest with this thing. And that's another time that they never killed any more than what they needed. That's good biology. If you went out in the world and you killed all the animals, there wouldn't be any more the next year. So they said, like my dad, when I would go hunting, he would say, son, we didn't have the game wardens. So it's time for you to quit hunting for rabbits or whatever it was. You can't kill anymore. As a little kid, I said, why? He said, because the mommies, when they have little babies soon, you have to leave them alone. And I said, yes, sir. We always obeyed. We had rabbit traps when I was growing up, a box with big flexible boards, and as a kid, Dad said, you make them and you can set them. And make this box and have a little trigger on the top, had a little stick across the top with a string on each end, and had like a slingshot in the middle to hold it up. And we put apples in that box, and we'd set the trap door, had a little door on the front, Rabbit got in there, started eating apples and knocking things around. He got making the door close. My dad said, if we catch a rabbit, we'll eat it. I have to tell you the truth. I caught a lot of rabbits, but I always came home without one. I'd reach in there and I'd smell first in that box to make sure it wasn't a skunk. Because they would get in there and eat apples too. And so I get that little bunny rabbit out, and you know if you ever mess with rabbits, it's going to squeal a little bit, but it won't bite you. It won't try to fight back. It scratch you a little bit. I let that rabbit go. I said, I'll catch you. I'll see you tomorrow. So we ate a whole lot of beans and potatoes, and not a whole lot of rabbits. Because I didn't ever have the nerve to kill that little bunny. It was my friends. We had them all over the mountainsides. So the old Cherokee people had their fire. And so another thing they invented was lacrosse. You think, well, that's a college game. Yes, it is. It was invented by the Native American people. And they played lacrosse with this type of stick. Nowadays, you see the big long sticks with a plastic scoop on the end of it. But this is evidently, and more than likely, the roughest game in the whole wide world. You had a ball about the size of a black walnut. You picked it up with this basket on the end of that. And you would take it out with your hand once you got it above your knees. And you better run for dear life because everybody's got a stick like this, and on the other team they're going to be chasing you with it. And they can use it to stop you too. They can bop you upside the head with it. They can choke you with it. They can throw it at you. It's made of hickory. If you, so mountain people know, if you go out and hit a tree with that hickory like that, it's going to take the bark off the tree. It's not going to break. If you have an axe handle, or a hoe handle, or a hammer handle made out of mountain hickory, it's not going to break. Those handles you buy nowadays at the hardware store, you hit a couple times with them, the whole thing breaks off the end. Not this. You got out there in the old days when the Cherokees played stickball, they went and nabbed at that bunch of catawba down here. And say, okay, let's play stickball. They get out there together and they play until someone scores 12 points. You pick up the ball, you run through the uprights, you come back to the middle, you throw it up in the middle 12 times, and if you can run across the end, you got 12 points, you won the ball game. Sometimes these games were over in like 10 minutes. Sometimes they lasted like 5 days. If you didn't get finished during the day, you laid down on the field at night, and they would bring you food, so you'd eat it right there, you'd sleep right there, but you'd stay right there on the ball field, you couldn't leave till the game was over. Why was it so rough? Because Cherokee people got tired of seeing wars where people would fight and people were lost. And they said, we play the stickball game instead. And they came home with knots on their heads, broken fingers. But the main thing is they came home. The wives and the sisters didn't have to go looking for them. We think about even cowpens down here. We think about the mountain where the British and the revolutionary people were fighting. And there was terrible situations, but this game avoided all that. Stickball. And if you want to play this, come on up to Cherokee, okay? It's not going to happen this year because they canceled it again because of COVID. The first full week in October, and I'd encourage you to have them bring you up and let you look and watch, okay? They get out there and you think, oh my gosh, he picked that guy up and smacked him on the ground. Yes, he did. And they probably were mad at one another a little bit, but when they get through the game, it's all over. And they understand that whoever wins, wins. Whoever loses, loses. And they get up with their friends when they leave the field. So this is the way stickball works. I want to tell you a story. This is a true story. I was teaching 3rd grade in 1978. This is when I graduated from Western Carolina after leaving Gardner. Got my first job teaching. because that guidance counselor told me I could have become a teacher. I went back and talked with him. And so I had a little girl in my 3rd grade class, her name was Melinda. Melinda couldn't run very fast. She loved to play kickball, but she couldn't kick very far. But she was in 3rd grade and it didn't matter. They let her kick until she got on the base. They let her run around the bases until eventually she got home. And she was so happy in 3rd grade, even though she held her pencil in the wrong way, even though she couldn't run very fast. But Melinda had a heart condition. So Melinda went through Christmas time, and she was doing well. At the end of the year, she graduated from my 3rd grade class, and she went into the 4th grade. But the principal came down there that year. He said, Mr. Owle, you know I'm a man in 3rd grade. They don't see that. It doesn't need to be up there with the big kids. He said, Mr. Owle, you have to go to 6th grade next year. I said, I don't want to go to 6th grade. I have all my records. You know, some of you remember, some of the older ones remember the mimeograph machine. You had to turn it. That's the way you made your copies. You didn't go to the computer and hit print. Right? You know, when you make this thing, you burn this thing, and you put it on that big wheel, and you turned it around, and it had mimeograph fluid in it. Got all over your hands, and your hands turned purple. You teachers, any of you office workers remember that? You had purple monsters. I had my cabinets filled with all those lessons. The principal said, you have to go to 6th grade, and you don't have to leave all those lessons. I had to go to 6th grade, I had to start over again, and I had to wait for Melinda. It'd be 3 years before she got to me. 4th, 5th, 6th. I was worried about her because she didn't have a mother, and she had that heart condition, and I just wanted to make sure she was okay. 3 years went by. She came to the 6th grade. She came in that room that morning, and I noticed she wasn't happy the way she used to be. I said, what is going on? She said, I'm okay. We went out at 10 o'clock to play kickball. I knew she liked kickball. Went out there to play kickball, and I looked, and she went over to the side of the playground and sat down on the bench. The others went out and started playing, and I said, why aren't you playing with the others? She said, they don't want me. Why don't they want you? Why don't they let you play? I can't run fast enough. I can't kick the ball the way I should. I make them lose, and they don't choose me. I said, well, will you play if they choose you? She said, I will play if they choose me, but they're not going to choose me. I said, oh, yes, they will. She said, then I won't play. I said, good enough, that's it. So the little boy was coming in, he was the last one coming in. You know this student in your class, right? Got to carry the ball in. If you don't get to carry the ball, he's going to cry, and it's leaving in 6th grade. He came over there to the door, and I said, okay, Steve, speed it up a little bit. I want to ask you something. So I went over there. He said, why do you want me to ask him? I said, do you really know what the playground looks like? He said, no, not really. I said, look at it for a whole minute. Do you know how long a minute is? That's a long time, 60 seconds, right? And I said, look at it for a whole minute. He looked at it. He said, I finished. I said, no, 60 seconds. He looked at it from one end to the other. He said, okay, what do you want? I said, I wanted to tell you that if you don't choose Melinda for your team tomorrow, you will never see this playground again as long as I'm your teacher. He did like that, you know. And I just looked at him like this. He said, okay. Big tear was rolling up his eye. And I'm glad he said okay because I was about ready to quit. And the next day he came out there and I want Melinda for my team. She almost fell off the bench where she was sitting. And she came out there and they rolled the ball to her. And you know what happens when you kick that round ball, which is a sphere on the top, and you almost get it, but you miss it. Turns into a wheel, doesn't it? She went and rolled across the top of that ball and hit the ground really hard.
said, he was asking me, right? Is she out? I said, roll it again. So they rolled it again to her, she kicked it a little way, she went out for the shortstop. That little girl's name was Juanita. Juanita means baby beaver. And I don't know why they named her these two names. And Juanita, baby beaver. Juanita, baby wolf. Her name was Baby Wolf, Baby Beaver. So Juanita came out there and she picked up that ball. She came running down through there. I was standing between home base and first base. And Melinda was running by. Juanita ran behind her and she reared back like that. And if you ever really pay attention to what people are saying with their body, nonverbal communication is what it's going to be called when you grow up. The way they stand, or the way they are happy, or they're just coming in sad. This is very important if you're going to be a teacher. You got to look at every kid when they come in the door every morning, and they tell you. She was running like this, and her eyes were big, and she was focused on Melinda, and she was saying, I'm going to hit her in the back of the head, I'm going to hit her hard. I didn't have a cell phone. So I sent her a message anyway. I'm going to try to turn this thing down in case it rings, okay? My message was, if you hit her in the back of the head, you are in big, big trouble with me. Melinda sort of ran on, and Juanita threw that ball. They went out toward the left. They went out in right field a long, long ways. Melinda made it first base. And Juanita just turned to me and she just smiled, and she went back to her place, the shortstop. And she got the message that day. And little Melinda turned around. She took about this many steps and turned and faced me. And there was a big third-grade smile again. How much did that cost? Nothing. A little bit of consideration. She was on first base. She was smiling. She was happy. And then the line in the 6th grade changed. The people at the back seemed to come to the front. The people at the front went to the back, and they made room for Jolene. Well, she was a big 6th grade, about this big. And boy, when you get into 6th grade, I want to tell you something. Seems like the girls are about this tall, and you're about this big. But you'll catch up with them one day, okay? And you'll outgrow them one day. Jolene kicked that ball so hard it turned him from a spear into a pizza. It went flying up in the air, it went over the fence in the Kentucky Fried Chicken parking lot. About a half mile away, and I had to go get the ball. I went across that fence. I'd come from Iwakuni Air Base in Japan, and I had a beautiful necktie. It was silk. It had gold threads in it, and they were made into the shape of cranes. That was a nice tie, wasn't it? Real gold threads. I got hung on the chain link fence, which looks like this. I fell over in the mud on the other side. But I got that ball. It was muddy and dirty. I was muddy and dirty. But when I come back across the fence, when I came back across, I saw one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen in my life. Something I don't want you to forget. Jolene was walking behind Melinda as Melinda crossed home base. Some of you are going to be big, you're going to be strong, you're going to kick home runs in life and business and everything else. But you have to remember, you don't have to run over the people in front of you. You got a home run, okay? They won't even call the day of game on you. You just walk around those bases if you want to, wave at everybody. You've made a home run. Little bit of Melinda left 6th grade that year, graduated, because those were the days you were separated. 6th grade stopped at elementary. Then when you went to 7th, you were really in the high school with big kids. Which was not a good thing, but that's the way it worked. Melinda looked at me after graduation. I bought me another tie. I was all dressed up. She said, "Are you coming to my graduation?"
have to remember this is the reservation. I thought, girl, I'm at your graduation. She must have looked in my eyes because she said, I don't need this one. She said, my daddy has already died of sugar diabetes, and that's a bad thing with Native American people. High blood pressure, heart disease, sugar diabetes. And she said, I want you to be there. Because my grandma's the only one left. I said, I'll be there. 6 years passed, I got an invitation. I went to her graduation. I sat on the front row, exactly where she wanted me to sit. I got there an hour early. She came down and she said, you're the best teacher I ever had. I said, why do you say that? You've had great teachers. I said, you're the only one that cares. Cared enough to make the other ones include me. And she said, I've done fine. So she went away to college, looks like I did, and I'm sure she felt a whole lot like I did going away. Feel like you're 1,000 miles from home, and you really weren't. I come through Shelby every now and then, just every few weeks now. But little Melinda graduated from high school, went away to college, Brevard College, made good grades, and I said, are you going back? In the fall of the year, I'm proud of your grades. Little Melinda said, no, I can't go back. So she had to go to Duke instead. And so some things happened that way. She was not able to finish her college. But you know, she was included in her classes. Everybody there loved her. And that's the most important thing of all. You know, there's a lot of stories about things like that are real. I want to tell you, the Cherokee people believe in something called the little people. I have never seen one of these critters, but the Irish, some of you here are probably part of Irish. So the Irish people believe in the little fairy people that live out in the woods and in rock piles. Cherokees believe in little people. They said there are 3 kinds of them. There are those little people who live way on top of the mountains. And if you go up there and you're quiet enough long enough, they will come out, make sure you're okay, playing little tiny drums, singing little songs. They will teach you cures and prayers, which are very valuable. And then there's the little people who live down in the valleys like this. And these little people who live down here are mischievous. They're always doing something to aggravate you. If you ever put something down, and you know you put it there, and you go to look for it, and it's not there, and you go accuse your sister, taking your ring or whatever it was, please give it back to me. And she said, I didn't get it. And you go back the next time, and you look, and there it is, exactly where you left it. Cherokee say that the little people are messing with your minds. They'll think some things on top of your roof, and you hear this thing go boom off your roof at night. Go out and look the next day, there's nothing there. Well, it could have been a flying squirrel that miscalculated, or it could be the little people throwing rocks on your house. And so the old Cherokees truly believe in these little people. I remember I went away and I learned a lot of science. Meiosis and mitosis and all of these kind of cell divisions. And I was a real scientist, so I went back and told people in Cherokee, I don't believe in that stuff. Well, one day I know I sort of watched this happen. The blizzard of 1993, some of you older folks remember that. It snowed this deep. I mean here. It was 25 below zero. It was cold. The wind was blowing and the snow kept coming. Everything was just, the power all went off for 2 weeks. There was an old man before them that they were trying to get everybody in. They went back home and he was gone before it started snowing. And they looked all over the place for him, and the snow began to pile up, and they said, oh my gosh, if he's not somewhere taken care of, he's gone.
And the snow came, and 2 weeks passed, they finally got out and they started looking for him again. They couldn't find him at any relative's house. They couldn't find him anywhere. They gave up on him. And it began to get warm in the spring. It was like March the 5th. Snow melted pretty fast. They looked out in the yard, and there he sat in the yard, in the wet soil, in the wet grass. They said, "Where have you been?" With relatives? No. So I was back in the woods when it started snowing, looking for mushrooms and other plants. And he said, "Little people took me in. Took me in a cave. They took care of me. When the snow melted, they brought me back to the creek over there, but they couldn't cross the creek, so I had to wait." And they thought, "Oh, I'm going to believe that." When he got up, they looked, and his pants were wet about up to this high, almost to his knees. He said, "How did you get wet?" He said, "I told you I had to cross the creek. They couldn't bring me across." I thought, maybe there's something to this. So when you start hearing the thumps on the house, or the men start disappearing, and you bracelets, then all of a sudden they appear. Think about the old Cherokee and the Irish when they talk about the little people. All right. I'm going to give you a break right now. You've done really good listening. So if you have any questions, talk to me. Ask me any questions you like. I grew up on the reservation. I know what I know. And I promise you one thing, but I don't know the answer. I will not make up one. Okay? Any questions? Yes? Three kinds. And there's another one's not too good. I'll make it short. They're the ones who live in the deep holes in the river. We sometimes have things happen today like sleep apnea and things like that. And we have an explanation for that now. In the old times when the Cherokees were living here alone, they didn't understand all of that, so they sort of laid this on those guys. So, other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I've got 20 million questions I want to ask.
Sure.
But I'll just do a few. First of all, has the casino affected your people?
Yes, it has. You know, there's a couple of ways of looking at that. We lost 240,000 square miles of territory. And the government came in and they said, we had actually bought back some land. Those who hid the mountains, they bought back land. We worked, made money, gave it to a guy named Will Thomas, who was a Caucasian, and he was a citizen, and so it was all in his name, and we were still living there. The government came in and said, "We're going to change this over to trust land. That means the government's going to take care of it for us." So they took care of it for us, and it became trust land. You know who makes the gambling laws of the states? It's not state land. It's trust land. So we were exempt. The casino came in there, and all of those people who were the aggressors, think about it. Cherokees were taking off their land, and people came rushing in, getting these little lottery tickets so they get some of the Cherokee land. The ones who came rushing in are right at our borders to the land that we bought back. And so now those people come to our casinos, and they have this little thing around their neck, like a card, and they stretch it and it goes into that machine. And it rolls like that, and they take their money back. And they're the ones that are the most aggressive are the ones who are paying us now at the casinos, and we're buying land back. So that has affected us that way. When I came to college at Garden, I worked to come through these hills. Some of you might know that outdoor theater. I worked there as an usher for like 10 years. And for 5 of those years, I saved money so I could go to college. We had no scholarships. The government wouldn't give them to you because when you become a body offender man, they wasn't going to send us to college. So I paid my first years from the money from up these hills. Today, because of the casino, every Cherokee child who wants to go to college, it is totally paid for. Every scholarship for any university, any college that students want to go to, they pay this total tuition. I went to Harvard, they pay for it. The rest of any of these schools, Western Carolina, totally paid for. Plus, every Cherokee child gets $300, maybe even now $400 a month spending money. Man, if I'd had that at Garden Web, I'd probably go home on the weekends. But instead, I stayed there wondering if the Gaffney Strangler was going to come in there. Decker dorm. Oh, by the way, Decker dorm now is a girls' dorm. It was a guy's dorm back then. Yes, hospitalization. Anybody who takes the COVID vaccine is going to be thrown into a drawing. They're going to have $5,000, $10,000 prizes. They're going to have one $50,000 prize, and that's in October. They're going to do it again in November. That's the kind of money the Cherokees are dealing with now. Anything we want, we got. I'm one of the highest paid teachers in the state of North Carolina, Mr. Fire. Isn't that great? We're even higher than the state. And at Christmas time, we get like a $3,000 bonus. Would you say that whatever goes around is going to come around? It's your half of the Cherokee. And you know the wonderful thing about it, and I want you to hear this, hear it well. The Cherokees never were, they were upset, angry. And I want you to realize one thing. If you're angry with your neighbor, you stay angry about that all your life, and you're the one that's going to come out behind. Not them. We've got to deal with that. So the Cherokees are never angry about the relatives. You don't owe us anything. We will run the race, and we will eventually be either side by side with you, or we will continue until we win. You don't owe us a thing. Most people appreciate that. Cherokee people are a tough group of people, and those of you who have Cherokee blood, your spouses should not argue with you. But you're very quiet. And it's just like, not like a rattlesnake, probably like a copperhead, just there waiting. If you come along at the fight at the wrong time, you're going to get tagged. So that's Cherokee temper, I suppose. That brother, he started laughing when he was bad. He started giggling, man, I got out of his way. But I knew he was getting angry. Any other questions? That answer yours. You got another one?
Yeah.
Okay, ask me to give you one more.
Okay.
All right.
I'm a retired educator myself, fifth grade.
All right. Right on. God bless you.
And I had at one time a little Navajo boy that came all the way from the Southwest with us for 1 year. He stayed through some churches or something. He stayed with us.
Yes.
And he was from a reservation too. But they had their kids, sort of like people that go to boarding school. You know, they had to go somewhere to live and stay there the whole school year. You know, away from their family.
Yeah.
Do they do anything like that up at the Cherokee children?
You see that all over the news nowadays. And there were boarding schools. My mother went to a boarding school. I went to school in the villages. I could go home during the day. It's totally different. My mother was taken into boarding school and they took away her necklaces. They cut her long hair. They took away her moccasins, anything that was Native American. If she spoke Cherokee like I was speaking to you a while ago,
they would weed curd with a barber's trap and wash your mouth out with Lysol. This happened all over the nation, and the policy, and I love America, I really do. Don't mistake it. And the United States policy was to kill the Indian and save the child. And that's exactly what they were doing under General Pratt. And it started at Carlisle military base, which became an Indian school. And you got computers, right? You can pull it up on the computer. Look up Carlisle Indian School. You can see a whole bunch. You go to images, a whole bunch of little kids standing out there. You not see one single smile or one single face, and there's hundreds of these little kids. And that tells a story. My mother said it was the saddest place in the whole world. Said they took her away from her parents when she was 5, just old enough to know her parents. And they did all these things. They taught her everything. And the Cherokee language is now still struggling. We're spending thousands of dollars trying to save. We had, when I was a kid growing up, we had like 2,000 fluent speakers of Cherokee. And now we only have 200. We're spending thousands of dollars every year teaching children all the way from kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, all the way into high school, trying to save the language. And it keeps the speakers keep going down, down, down. The only good thing about it is Sequoia made it a written language. And so a lot of the archives, that language is written. And that may be the only thing keep you from dying. So when little kids in my hallway, they get off the bus in the morning, they come down the hall, I say, "Yo, hello. Oh, see what's up? Are you doing all right?" And they look at me and they say, "Awesome. And he now. Doing good. How about you?" And we have general conversations, but unfortunately that's not all I can talk to them because they don't understand anyone in that. So we're trying, just like the Welsh language in Europe, is dying also. My daughter was over there, they were asking her how the Cherokee's trying to do it. We're going to try to sing our language too. Because it's dying. She sat down for hours on her trip and she talked to them and told them what the Cherokees were trying to do to save it, what they should not try to do. And the only way that works, because our little kids are taken away at the age of 5, kids up on the bus and they are taken to the new Cthulhu Academy. And the bus driver speaks Cherokee, the cook speaks Cherokee, the teacher speaks Cherokee, and while they're at school, nothing is spoken but Cherokee. And these little kids go home. And guess what? The parents don't speak Cherokee. So the kids can talk to themselves, between themselves. But it's still a struggle. And I don't know if it's going to live or not. It's a sad thing because once you lose the language, you've lost the people. The language is so intrinsic, so valuable. Okay? Okay.
I as a child, went to Cherokee.
Yes.
I'm sure also one of the people that alone, addresses and stuff. I would like to go back to that area. Is it something that the Cherokee promote now so people would come? Do they still? I would be a tourist, you know, I know it would be. Is there things there that
Yes.
you recommend us to do?
Yes, to answer that question, I'm sure. Is there anything Cherokee do now that is cultural? Yes. Down through these hills is still there. Just saw people shake his hand a while ago. It's a wonderful presentation. The Living Indian Village is still there. The Museum of Cherokee Indian is still there. Everything is still there. The shops where you used to go and have your picture taken from the headdresses. The casino is over on the other side of the hill for a reason. Those people are like a yellow jacket's nest. They come and go just like this, and we never see them. We don't know who comes and who goes. We really don't care. We're on the other side. We've opened up an island park where you can take your kids free of charge on that island park.
and they can play there all day in the beautiful Qualla River, which has no businesses above us. We come directly out of the national park, thanks be to God, and it's clean, and you can go out there and swim. The only thing that goes across that river is a hill bender or a moose. And a lot of big mountain tribes. Okay?
Is the reservation off limits?
No, never has been. You know, the Cherokee people have a different mentality when it comes to ownership. We cannot own the land. It was put here for the people, all the people. If you think you can own the beautiful tourist territories down here, when you pass away and go, it's going to be still terraced, still going to be beautiful. The rocks are still going to be there. You might be like a piece of lichen that was made an acidic mark on this earth. So let's try to make a good mark. Leave it in better shape than it was when you came. Clean up the wrong river a little more. Leave a good mark. Educator, is that good? All right. Other questions? How are you today? I like that mask. You like my mask? M-I-C-K-E-Y. You probably wore that mask? Because I knew there'd be kids here, and they like that, don't they? Do you have any questions? Good, good. Fine, very good. You're a good student, aren't you, student?
I read online college.
All right, that's good. You're a good student on the line, then, aren't you?
Yeah.
You make me feel good about the future, because I know you're going to take care of this earth. You're going to do good. You listen well, I can watch you. Other questions on this side? This young lady's in college. She's going to be asking a lot of questions for her paper for. That's great. Margaret Webb student. No other questions? Yes. And why do little people move stuff around and throw rocks at your house? That's a good question. That's an exciting thing, isn't it? You probably won't ever see any of these little people, but you know, sometimes other people get into fights, say, oh, you took my shoes, you wore my shoes, and all this kind of stuff. And if you think they're missing, maybe you'll think, my sister didn't do that. It was the little people. So you and your sister, you're doing fine together, and you don't fight. That's one reason I think the Cherokee believe in little people. Okay? So like a scapegoat, they had somebody to blame it all. That's a good answer? And besides, I don't know, they may be out there. I don't know. Sort of like that big giant shark, is it still alive? Can it be down in the bottom of the ocean somewhere? I don't know, it might be. I'm not going down there to see. All right. Boarding school. Was it good or was it bad? I think a little bit of both. My mother said they taught me more than I can imagine ever being taught. But she also said they took away more than I can ever imagine that I even had to take away. I guess the thing to do in situations like that, if you have to go through it, go through it as quickly as you can and come out as together as you can. She took care of us as a kid, doctored our little wounds, because she had been in boarding school. She worked as a nurse in the infirmary. But she couldn't teach us Cherokee language because she had been beaten. And she didn't remember it. She refused to teach us what she didn't remember. And that's bad. When I went to school, and they asked me if I spoke Cherokee, I had to say no. And then they started teaching it back again. So I went as a teacher. They gave me a break. Cherokee language teacher came in. Most teachers would not smoke in those days. I didn't smoke, so I sat in there with my kids. I became a student. So I learned all the Cherokee language I could, but my mother couldn't teach me. And so now I'm pretty fluent in Cherokee, but I'm still learning. I'm still learning. So everything in Cherokee is going pretty well. I want to tell you another story. Once there was a young man who was out in the woods, and he would come back and say, "Lord, I saw some bears today." By the way, when I drive home in the evening, I sometimes see bears on the side of the road. I live up on a mountain, and when I drive home, there'll be a big black bear sitting by the side of the road. Or he'll be eating blueberries in the fall of the year. He's just there. Sometimes I'll see little baby bears crossing the road. And so this guy came out and said, "I saw some bears today." And I said, "What did you do?" He said, "Oh, I went with them." "You went with them?" "Yeah, they ate." And they sort of got used to me, and so I'm going back tomorrow. I'm going to spend more time with them. And so you need to stay away from those bears. They're still wild animals. They will hurt you. And he said, "They know me." So the next day he went, and he didn't come back for about a week. Came back and said, "Where have you been?" "I've been to the bears." "I told you I was going to the bears." The next time he went, he didn't come back for 3 months. And the next time he went, he didn't come back at all. So the old Cherokees go out, sometimes they look at the bears, and they say, "The bears are related to us. The bears are like our brothers. So we have to be good to them." So the Cherokees sort of perceive that as being, we're related to the bear. And if you look at the bear's hind foot, it makes a print like a human foot. And if you look at it, hear a mama bear who's lost its little cub, oh, she cries like a mommy. She just, like a woman, she just cries. And that's sort of sad, but then when she finds that little baby, she's so excited. So the bears have a whole lot of human, I believe, and action, behavior. There's a story that said in the early times, the Cherokees were living in the council house and meeting in it during the winter because it was so cold outside. And all of a sudden it was dark in the council house, and up in the north corner there was a light that appeared, and they thought, "Oh my gosh, what is that?" And it started turning into the shape of a human, and about half of those people ran out the back door because they were scared it was a ghost. But all of a sudden it said, "Tohida, peace. I am Salaki. I'm a Cherokee." And they sort of stopped and wondered, what is that? It turned into a human that came walking down. He said, "Do not be afraid. I bring you news." And they said, "What is that?" They said, "From the east there will come a group of people who will take away your land and kill many of your villagers. You must follow me. Go to the mountains with me. I know where there's a land that's always beautiful. And it's always summertime where I will take you." About half of them decided to go with him. Half of them said, "No way." The half that went with him followed him to the mountainside. When he got up to the top of the mountain, he touched the rock cliff with his hand, and the rock cliff opened up, and inside you could see the butterflies. It was wintertime outside, flying around, and people were singing inside. And the people were walking down these beautiful stairwell into the center of the earth. And all of a sudden there was a man at the end. He says, "I can't leave my family." He went rushing back down to the village, rounded up his family. He said, "You got to come with me. It's beautiful." When he got back up there, the mountain was closed. And they said, "You lied to us." And they left him up there by himself. And so if you ever go to the mountains, do like he did. He sat down beside that rock cliff, and he was so quiet for a long time. Then he began to hear the singing deep within the earth. And the old Cherokee people tell me now, if you ever need to get away, especially as educators, Just go to the mountaintop. Sit and be quiet. And you too can hear the singing and the voices of the old ones deep from the middle of the earth. And that's what I do many times. I just go and sit. And once you've been to the mountains, which many of you have been, you know they always call you back. So it's a place of going up above the problems, and mile high water rock knob, and looking down on the valleys, and all of a sudden those big problems that you're having become very small. Watching the sunrise or the sunset and all the beauty of God's creation. One way to get away from all the busy and all the hurts and all the pain. I think I will be here. Answer any other questions you may want to ask. I'll be up here near the front. And I want to tell you about the necklace I made. My family was on the Trouble Tears. They lived down around Murphy. When the soldiers came, my great-great-grandmother had 3 children. They took them down to the United States Fort Butler in Murphy. They incarcerated them in that fort in the mud and the rains. And many of them got sick because of the water they drank was from mud puddles. They gave them cornbread and cornmeal and back to eat. This is the U.S. Army. And the cornmeal usually had bugs in it. And the fatback was sour and not quite edible. Dysentery was rampant. 2 of the babies died in that concentration camp. The other one was on mommy's back, wrapped up in a sheet. They crossed the Unicoi Mountains in Charleston, Tennessee. They had that group up above the creek on the right side. I went and I stood where they camped just recently. So we have records of which group camped where. And that was quite a feeling, standing there. They went on to Nashville, Tennessee from there. Well, it took them several days. When they got to Nashville, they headed north. They stopped at Hopkinsville, and there was a terrible winter storm. She tied the baby on her back again and told her husband, "I can't take any more. I've lost 2. I'm going home." She walked out in the middle of the blizzard. And the beautiful people of the land helped her to get back home. They took her in. She and the baby fed them. She made it back to Murphy, North Carolina, ran the people out of her log cabin that had already taken it over. It was a year later that the old man came back. They were reunited. He turned around and sued the United States government. I have a copy of the lawsuit. He lost the case, of course, for all the things in the cabin they had taken from him. $314. And the reason he lost the case was he was not a citizen of the United States. We've been here 15,000 years. Possibly not quite long enough for citizenship. And so, I remember that, but I know for the little baby that survived, Mary, his name was David. I want you to listen carefully. My great-great-grandfather's name was John. He named his baby David. David had 2 sons. He named the first one Adam, and he named the second one Solomon. Tell the story of his son. But I still live on the property that they got back after the Trouble Tears on Goose Creek, Wagonville Gap Road. And they're all buried on the hills. So the Trouble Tears is a real thing to me. And most of the people living on the reservation in Cherokee didn't suffer the Trouble Tears because they were part of drowning garrison. Who were allowed to stay behind because the state of North Carolina gave them citizenship.
They didn't have to go on the trails here. The ones from Murphy and those areas did. But then in about 1840, the state of North Carolina took away the citizenship from the Cherokees. And they were no longer people on land. That's when it was in Will Thomas in there. But then they gave it back to them in 1924, and we were able to vote. If any of you went to the University of North Carolina, look up Henry Owle, O-W-L. He was the first Native American person to go to the University of North Carolina. And there's a scholarship in his name. So, thank God from University of North Carolina. He went back to Rice City to vote. He had his master's degree from University of North Carolina. And they were been telling the Cherokees, you can't vote because you can't read, you're illiterate. He took his dissertation there, and they read it. I guess they could read it. They said, well, the reason you can't vote now is because you're not a citizen of the United States. He went to Congress, Henry Owle did. And from that day forward, the Cherokee people have been able to vote. We owls have always been in the middle of everything. So some of it turned out good, and some of it pretty bad. Even had a moonshiner too, I think. All right. I'll be up here at the front. And this trellis here is a necklace I've made. Red, courage. Yellow, purity. Cherokee color. White, peace. Black beads are 1/3 of the whole number of beads on there. Stand for the death of the trellis here. 1/3 of the nation died. The 7 little seed beads on there. 7 plants of the Cherokee. The necklace are $7 if you're interested. Any of them, I'm gonna say, I do it in the winter time when I'm online and waiting for the kids to get online. Thank you. I hope you have a good day and thank you for coming.